Hi, peace lovers. It's December, and I'm still practicing my Kidio Compost voice. For these last couple of weeks of the year, I've gathered 17 holiday inspired public domain readings from writers like L. Frank Baum, Henry David Thoreau, and Charles Dickens. It's a bit quirky, I know, but so is Kitty, and so is the new Peace podcast series arriving right here on New Year's Day, the Peace Experiments, Experiment Zero. A humming government facility, a skeptical fact-checking goat, and a classroom full of teens collide when reporter Kitty Ocampos begins investigating the myths that keep peace just out of reach. The peace experiments explore what happens when young people finally ask the questions adults avoid. And perhaps you've been hearing the Next Peacelands here on the podcast. We'll be returning soon to the practice of holding peaceful intention for the specific war zones and the countries that supply weapons to them. But during this stretch of Kitty Reed's Holiday Lit for Peace, the Next Peacelands will simply offer the names of some of the spiritual organizations working quietly and steadily for peace. You can add your own peace intentions to their hopeful rivers of peace if you choose to stay through the end of this episode. As always, the creative books and projects I make for peace can be found at aviskalfsbeek.com, and the music for the Next Peacelands comes from the talented Javier Peque Rodriguez. Joy and peace to you and yours, and to the world. Now over to Kitty. Today's reading comes from Nathaniel Hawthorne, an American writer whose whole life circled around the question of moral responsibility. He was born in Salem, Massachusetts, right under the long historical shadow of the witch trials, and he carried the legacy like a reporter carrying the old case file, always asking what happens to a community when judgment outruns understanding. Hawthorne spent years sharpening his observational skills, first in solitude as a young writer, then working in the Boston Custom House, where he watched every stripe of human ambition, vanity, and worry walk past his desk. He understood the way conscience tugs at ordinary people, and he wrote about the costs of secrecy, pride, and unchecked certainty with the precision of someone who had studied human nature up close. The Christmas Banquet, published in 1844, isn't a cheerful holiday tale. Hawthorne rarely chose the easy road, but it is a clear example of how he used fiction to examine the colder rooms of the human heart. He wasn't trying to frighten anybody. He was trying to tell the truth about how sorrow sits at the table with us and how the smallest act of warmth can still change the air in the room. And well, honey, I could read the inspection tag off a custom house ledger if it helped us look a little straighter at ourselves. Sometimes the words hand you a lantern instead of a candy cane, because an honest light can be its own kind of peace, especially when nobody, for goodness sake, is holding a gosh darn gun. Following is an excerpt from The Christmas Banquet by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I have here attempted, said Roderick, unfolding a few sheets of manuscript as he sat with Rosina and the sculptor in the summer house. I have attempted to seize hold of a personage who glides past me occasionally in my walk through life. My former sad experience, as you know, has gifted me with some degree of insight into the gloomy mysteries of the human heart, through which I have wandered like one astray in a dark cavern, with his torch fast flickering to extinction. But this man, this class of men, is a hopeless puzzle. Well, but propound him, said the sculptor. Let us have an idea of hint to begin with. Why, indeed, replied Roderick, he is such a being as I could conceive you to carve out of marble, and some yet unrealized perfection of human science to endow with an exquisite mockery of intellect. But still there lacks the last inestimable touch of a divine creator. He looks like a man, and perchance like a better specimen of a man than you ordinarily meet. You might esteem him wise. He is capable of cultivation and refinement, and has at least an external conscience. But the demands that spirit makes upon spirit are precisely those to which he cannot respond. When at last you come close to him, you find him chill and unsubstantial, a mere vapor. I believe, said Rosina, I have a glimmering idea of what you mean. Then be thankful, answered her husband, smiling, but I do not anticipate any further illumination from what I am about to read. I have here imagined such a man to be, what probably he never is, conscious of the deficiency in his spiritual organization. Methinks the result would be a sense of cold unreality wherewith he would go shivering through the world, longing to exchange his load of ice for any burden of real grief that fate could fling upon a human being. Contenting himself with this preface, Roderick began to read. In a certain old gentleman's last will and testament there appeared a bequest, which as his final thought indeed was singularly in keeping with a long life of melancholy eccentricity. He devised a considerable sum for establishing a fund, the interest of which was to be expended annually forever in preparing a Christmas banquet for 10 of the most miserable persons that can be found. It seemed not to be the testator's purpose to make these 50 of sad hearts merry, but to provide that the stern or fierce expression of human discontent should not be drowned, even for that one holy and joyful day, amid the acclamations of festal gratitude which all Christendom sends up. And he desired likewise to perpetrate his own remonstrance against the earthly course of Providence, and his sad and sour dissent from those systems of religion or philosophy which either find sunshine in the world or draw it down from heaven. The task of inviting the guests, or of selecting among such as might advance their claims to partake of this dismal hospitality, was confided to the 2 trustees or stewards of the fund. These gentlemen, like their deceased friend, were sombre humorists who made it their principal occupation to number the sable threads in the web of human life and drop all the golden ones out of the reckoning. They performed their present office with integrity and judgment. The aspect of the assembled company on the day of the first festival might not, it is true, have satisfied every beholder that these were especially the individuals chosen forth from all the world, whose griefs were worthy to stand as indicators of the mass of human suffering. Yet after due consideration it could not be disputed that here was a variety of hopeless discomfort, which, if it sometimes arose from causes apparently inadequate, was thereby only the shrewder imputation against the nature and mechanism of life. The arrangements and decorations of the banquet were probably intended to signify that death in life which had been the testator's definition of existence. The hall, illuminated by torches, was hung round with curtains of deep and dusky purple, and adorned with branches of cypress and wreaths of artificial flowers, imitative of such as used to be strewn over the dead. A sprig of parsley was laid by every plate. The main reservoir of wine was of a sepulchral urn of silver, whence the liquor was distributed around the table in small vases, accurately copied from those that held the tears of ancient mourners. Neither had the stewards, if it were their taste that arranged these details, forgotten the fantasy of the old Egyptians, who seated a skeleton at every festive board, and mocked their own merriment with the imperturbable grin of a death's head. Such a fearful guest, shrouded in a black mantle, sat now at the head of the table. It was whispered, I know not with what truth, that the testator himself had once walked the visible world with the machinery of that same skeleton, and that it was one of the stipulations of his will that he should be thus permitted to sit from year to year at the banquet which he had instituted. If so, it was perhaps covertly implied that he had cherished no hopes of bliss beyond the grave to compensate for the evils which he felt or imagined here, and if in their bewildered conjectures as to the purpose of earthly existence, the banqueters should throw aside the veil and cast an inquiring glance at this figure of death as seeking thence the solution otherwise unattainable. The only reply would be a stare of the vacant eye caverns and a grin of the skeleton jaws. Such was the response that the dead man had fancied himself to receive when he asked of death to solve the riddle of his life, and it was his desire to repeat it when the guests of his dismal hospitality would find themselves perplexed with the same question. "What means that wreath?" asked several of the company while viewing the decorations of the table. They alluded to a wreath of cypress, which was held on high by a skeleton arm protruding from within the black mantle. "It is a crown," said one of the stewards, "not for the worthiest, but for the woefulest, when he shall prove his claim to it." Thank you for listening and allowing me to practice Kitty's reporting voice for the big story ahead. Now stay with me a few minutes longer if you're able for the Next Peacelands. Following is a special holiday edition of the Next Peacelands, where we pause on listing the war zones and weapons suppliers. Instead, we rest our intention of peace on a few of the spiritual organizations working tirelessly toward peace. While this list is far from comprehensive, the total number of organizations, large and small, would number in the thousands if we included all who work daily for peace. I ask that you consider taking this time to add your own intention of peace to those working daily toward that goal. Mennonite Central Committee. Peace is here. Community of Santa Hidio. Peace is here. The Network for Religious and Traditional Peacemakers. Peace is here. Religions for Peace. Peace is here. Pax Christi International. Peace is here. American Friends Service Committee. Peace is here. Lutheran Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. The International Fellowship of Reconciliation. Peace is here. Baptist Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Community Peacemaker Teams. Peace is here. Episcopal Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Friends Peace Teams. Peace is here. Muslim Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Buddhist Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Quaker Peace and Social Witness. Peace is here. Network of Christian Peace Organizations. Peace is here. Network of Spiritual Progressives. Peace is here. United Religions Initiative. Peace is here. The Christian Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. Peace is here. Agape International Spiritual Center. Peace is here.